What's up, everybody? My name is Sean, and I do love sports cards. And I'm going to do something a little different this week because I've had a couple of weeks off. I've been away on holiday, living the non-card life, still checking eBay, but in a different location. And I realized when I came back that it's now been 6 months since I started getting back into sports cards again. Started looking at stuff, trying to sort of um, turn this into something a little bit more sustainable. The main motivation being I didn't want to burn out again. I didn't want to get to a point where I didn't like what I was doing and I wasn't enjoying it. I wanted to make it sustainable and fun. So this is a bit of a in the United States, they have a thing called, if you're not aware, I think most people are, but they have a thing called the State of the Union, where they talk about how things are going. Where's the government at? What are the priorities? What's working? What's not working? Well, that's what it's supposed to be, at least. Anyway, this is my sort of State of the Union 6 months in. Okay, so very early in. I'm under no illusions that it's not supposed to be perfect at the moment. But this is where I'm at. So starting with, I suppose, like the easy stuff or the good stuff, the fun stuff, sales. So, and I think there's an interesting there's a little caveat here. I think with all of these numbers, which is I'm not I wasn't starting from zero. Okay. When I restarted this, I think the numbers are artificial. I think the numbers are artificial because I was starting like with stock at zero cost. Because when I was engaged with the hobby back in, I mean, I've been engaged, I've been in and out of hobby cards my entire life. But the last time I was in around 2020, 2021, I made the explicit choice, like I have now, that I wouldn't use personal funds to buy stuff. So whether it was boxes or packs or singles or anything like that, that was always going to be self-funding. So what that meant was that not only was I didn't have to um, intellectually, I didn't have to put these costs down as at zero cost because of time. Like I wasn't writing off any costs, I suppose is the phrase that I was looking for there. I know that these cards cost me £0. So, but what that meant was that there's this weird sort of acceleration of stock that you wouldn't otherwise get, because how many other times in a business are you going to be able to start with all of this stock that costs you zero and use it to fund? So with all that caveat out of the way, I made 28 sales in the first 6 months. Um, and I sold nearly £5,000 worth of trading cards in that time. Now, again, and a few of those were a couple of big sales. So my Lewis Hamilton 70th red represents nearly 20% of that. Um, and that was, yeah, like a card that I got in a break that I graded. That the net cost for that card was £0 because of other sales that I'd made back in the early part of the decade. That's really useful. That's really helpful when you're trying to establish this business model. And that's why, like, I guess the comp here is when people say, I built myself from the ground up. I've worked really hard for this. Yeah, sure, you did work really hard for this. You own your own home, but you can't discount the fact that, for example, your parents gave you an interest-free loan for it. Like, this is the interest-free loan version of trading cards. Like, I already had this stuff. So 28 sales, not bad. I'm not pushing. I Part of the reason why I'm doing YouTube, part of the reason why I started posting on Instagram and things like that is to try and get more eyeballs on these kinds of things, right? So um, I've done a couple of sales on Facebook, a couple of sales on Instagram, but the overwhelming majority through eBay. So obviously get whacked with the fees on that. But the long and the short of it, nearly £5,000 worth of sales. Got the email from eBay probably about a month ago saying, hey, by the way, be aware of tax. So I'm covering that up as well. In the red, in the bad stuff, it's things that I've bought. So I've bought 47 raw cards. I've bought 47 raw cards over the 6 months and two Pokemon ETBs, which I'm not sure. I wasn't sure at the time if it was a good idea, and I'm even less sure now. But they're there. 47 raw cards, two ETBs for 2,537 roughly. I've spent £950 on grading 36 cards. We'll come back to those in a minute, but £950 on grading cards. And the £300 on operational costs is things like I bought a thermal printer so that I wouldn't have to handwrite addresses when I was selling things out, and also it looks more professional. So I definitely wanted to do that. And I've seen a couple of return sales, and I think part of that is that sort of that investment, and it's not a lot when you look at the sales and the boards. Like £300 is nothing. It's not nothing. £300 is a lot of money, but £300 on printer and FedEx and stamps and envelopes and printer ink and all that kind of stuff. You obviously have to account for all of that. So the main thing for me so far is that the number in green is bigger than the number in red. That's sort of my ultimate aim here. Even early on. Now early on, I would expect that the number in red would be higher than the number in green, because you are funding in order to with any kind of retail model like this, you're funding in order to generate a flywheel of future profit. And I'll explain my sort of model. I've done it before, but I'll explain it again here in a moment. But generally speaking, not unhappy with any of those things. Again, the bought cards, when we talk about grading, there's some, I found some old Pokemon cards that I bought and I've sent them in for grading, and the net cost of those cards is zero again. So there's a bit of that going on as well. The numbers that matter to me, at least anyway. So in terms of operating profit, just a shade over £1,100, which, I mean, it's not zero, which is great. I'm not like, and remember, like, objectives matter here, right? If I was somebody who was running a bricks and mortar store, an operating profit of £1,100 would not be, I don't know, because I've never run a store like that, but it would, I'm guessing it would probably be disastrous, because let me put it this way, I'm not quitting my job anytime soon to run an eBay store, and I never intended to. This is what I mean by objectives matter. Like, my objective here is to run a fun side hustle that has relatively minimal impact on my personal life in terms of the amount of time that I have to spend doing stuff, whether that is, like, that's why I have a lot of respect for people who buy large amounts of bulk raw and resell them on. Like, if you've got the time to do all the postage and the uploading to eBay and like, good for you. I don't have the time for that. So this works for me. Likewise, I don't have the time to stand in a line on Regent Street at the FedEx store for 9 hours waiting for a box to release to flip it for a few £100, because I have a job, and that job pays me more than I would make off that. So again, like, it depends on your objective with these kinds of things, and I think that gets lost a little bit sometimes. Like, I know a lot of people talk about, like, the difference between collectors and flippers and things like that, but also within the people who sell to make a bit of money to fund whatever they want to fund. There's different ways people want to approach that as well, I suppose. And so my main thing here, the profit that I'm generating is going twofold, which is I want to buy cooler cards. I want to buy cards that I could hypothetically sell, but also cards that, I always operate off the principle that if it goes to zero, I don't really care. So the big reason why this number matters so much to me is that if the trading card market completely collapsed tomorrow, I can turn to my wife and say, we didn't lose anything. Okay, I have some pieces of cardboard. They're absolutely useless, but they have a lot of sentimental value to me. So I don't buy cards that I don't think I would like. Okay, I always buy the cards that I would like. Buy cards that I could give to my kids is a big motivator for me as well. And stay in profit. So that works for me. And I also, and we'll get into this, but another part of this is to keep that flywheel going, to generate it. But also, I don't have the investments in my life that I would like to have. So skimming amount of this operating profit to put into shares to be able to start to have that in the background generating money as well, just for my own personal life, right? I have about £2,000 in free cash now. When I was building this presentation, I definitely had a bit of a moment of crisis. I was like, why do I have so much more in my free cash than I do in my profit? That doesn't make any sense. And if you were looking at this and you didn't know, then you would equally, I think quite fairly, come to that conclusion. What I can tell you is there was early on in the first 6 months, for the first couple of months, I was using an alternate revenue generating stream, which I won't discuss here, but it was perfectly legal. But I was using it to also help sort of fund um, buying of cards and getting into it and things like that. It wasn't healthy for me to do it. It wasn't good for me mentally. It wasn't good for me stress wise. So I've stopped doing that. But that's why there's a difference, and that number will probably persist for a while. But what matters is that I have that free cash of around £2,000. I have about £1,800 worth of unrealized sales on eBay at the moment. I think it's 18 or 19 cards. I hate the concept of unrealized sales because I think, you know, I'm not gonna make £1,800 off the cards that I've got on eBay, because the reality is I'm going to sell almost all of them for less than I have them listed for. But you do have to account for this thing when you're what I've realized, what I've learned is, when you're trying to plan these things, when you're trying to work out where you're at, you can't just look at the free cash, you can't just look at the profit and not acknowledge the fact that you do have things up for sale, and that's going to impact you down the line, right? I know that's probably quite simple to a lot of people, but I guess it never really occurred to me. And the reason I have a problem with unrealized sales is I can make that number be as big or as small as I want. Okay, I would say that the reasonable number for those unrealized sales is probably close to £1,100 when all is said and done. When you take out fees, when you take out negotiating, when you take out that time that I get sick of something and I just sell it for the sake of it. Okay. A lot of it is tied up. A lot of that £1,800 is tied up in a single Max Verstappen printer plate from the 2020 Chrome Formula One set. But it is there. It's like, that's the reality. The reality is I have cards on eBay, some of which sold this week, that are sitting there that will continue to generate revenue. I also have a lot of cards, well, not a lot of cards. I have cards at PSA at the moment. I have 32 cards currently in PSA waiting to come back from grading. And they're worth about £1,400. I say question mark because, again, 10 of those cards are Pokemon cards that I have in my tracking listed as cost zero to buy, because I bought them 5 years ago as part of what I was doing back then. It's at zero cost, but I looked at them and I thought, wait, actually, these might be valuable. I think I did an Instagram on this. Hey, wait, these might actually be valuable. I'm going to send these in. So the reality is I have 32 cards in flight at PSA coming back in regular timeframes. So what does this all mean? I'm operating on monthly cycles. Okay, I go month by month by month, and I do the same thing every month. I buy 6 cards. I target 6 cards that I buy raw, and I send them in for grading. And my aim for those 6 cards is to get as many of them to be PSA 10 as possible, so I can sell them for profit. Ideally, what I'll do is sell them for less than the comps for a PSA 10, because that way you get a deal, I get a deal, I make profit, you get a card for cheaper than you want, everybody wins. Obviously, we want to minimize the amount of non-PSA 10s and get as close to cost price as I possibly can. So every month I have a budget of about £240 for those raw cards. So £40 each. Obviously, it flexes up and down because I don't want to buy cards all in the same sort of pricing area. I have a grading budget of about £180. Obviously, that has gone up, may go down again, probably won't. And that's where I put £50 every month from the money that I've got into my share portfolio. In time, what I'll start doing is skimming a percentage of my sales into the shares instead of just the straight £50, and hope to build that up. But the long and the short of it is, you got every month I budget for $240 for raw cards, $180 for grading budget, £50 for shares. So what does that mean? That means as of today, mid-April, I am funded for my cards, my grading, and my shares for April, May, June, and July. I feel great about this. I feel really, really good about the fact that there is no pressure on me to sell anything for the next 4 months, 3.5 months. Okay, anything that I sell simply either funds August and September, or becomes part of that buffer operating. You know, like if I get an upcharge or something like that, I can cover it. All these kinds of things, right? Because I have that buffer. I think I have. I'm funded through July, and I've got £400 If I can remember my maths right. So I feel like I'm in a really good place, and the risk here is to overextend. So I'm just trotting along. Things are going really, really good. The only pause for thought here, and we'll talk about it right now, is all of this is predicated on me so far selling cards that I already had. It hasn't actually tested the models. So my model of sending 6 cards in, getting them back from grading, and then selling them on for a profit. None of this has been tested yet. So it's great that I'm funded through to July, but I haven't actually tested my model yet. So do we think the model works? Well, great news. I got my first PSA return back recently, about a month ago. Okay. It was 4 cards. It was like my initial send in October of 2025, 2 PSA 10s and 2 PSA 9s back. Okay. I got a PSA 10, Kylian Mbappe, a PSA 9, Kylian Mbappe, a PSA 9, Lionel Messi, and a PSA 10, Bukayo Saka. 2 of those cards have sold. Okay. I had the 2021 Topps Stadium Chrome, Lionel Messi, Barcelona, in his Barcelona uniform. So what appealed to me about this card was it was numbered, first and foremost. Numbered to 99 is not a bad number. Messi, so the big checkoffs for me. Messi, Barcelona, numbered. If I can get it within my budgets, I'm there. Okay. If it looks clean, if it looks decent, I'm there. Got a PSA 9. Not catastrophic. There's been a lot of chat on Instagram that I've read recently about we need to get PSA 9s to be worth more than raw. The market's going to do what the market's going to do. I agree. I think a PSA 9 should be worth more than raw, but I also understand the logic as to why it's not. It cost me £72 raw, and it cost me £27 to grade it. So I was in for £99. Okay, and it came back a PSA 9. So you think, okay, can I sell this at a PSA 9 for £99 or more? And the answer is yes. So I sold it for £162.79, so I made a profit of £63. I think one of the big reasons why this card sold and sold well is because it's Lionel Messi and he's in his Barcelona kit. That's it. Okay. If this was a PSA 9 of Archie Thompson from the Melbourne Victory, big shout if anybody knows who the hell I'm talking about there. But if it was Archie Thompson in his Melbourne Victory kit, that's probably selling for less than raw, right? Like the fact that it was the choice of card, I think really helped me out on this one. A choice of card that might not necessarily have helped me out, but the first one that I sold of the 4 was this Saka 24-25 England uniform, out of 10, gold cracked, and it came back as a PSA 10. I am stunned that this came back as I cannot, like, I had these 2 flipped, right? I was sure that if any was going to come back as a 10 of the cards that I sent, I was sure it was probably going to be the Messi because it was the cleanest looking at it. Even looking at that card now on this picture, the way that the Select logo, the way they've got that sort of that weird square in the middle that Bukayo's in the middle of, it's not centered. Like it's bonkers to me that this came back as a 10, but thank you, PSA. Greatly appreciate it. So I paid £81 for it. And again, I paid £81 for a card. Bukayo Saka is one of my youngest son's favorite players. It's numbered to 10, England uniform. Great. Let's go. If it goes to 0, cool. You know, a memory of a great player that we enjoyed watching. Cost me £27 to grade, 118. Sold it for 181. Okay, profit of 72. So surely this means that the model works, right? Like it's been demonstrated twice here. Bought raw, graded, profited, off we go. Maybe. Okay, maybe it's 2 pieces of data in a long piece of data, right? And it's going to depend on my ability to continue to sell these things. It's going to depend on my ability to negotiate with people. It's going to depend on the players that I've picked and the cards that I've picked are interesting to people enough for them to look at them. Okay? It's interesting to me that the Messi sold and the Saka sold. There's very little interest in the Mbappes, which it was slightly. I'm a bit surprised by. I thought that there was more of a market for Mbappe. The Saka was snapped up quickly, and that might be to do with the card. So the Mbappe, I have an Mbappe numbered to 10. That's a PSA 9 in his PSG uniform, which I thought would be a great card. I may have it priced too high. But I also have a PSA 10 of him in his Real uniform, which I think is a lovely looking card. Just not that interested. People are just aren't. It may be that I've got a price too high, but I'm looking for offers and haven't had any. So this could prove that. I mean, obviously the grading model works. It's just whether or not the grading model works for me and works in the environment where grading costs what it costs and the timeframes are what they are. Okay, which doesn't work for people. A lot of people like speculators and quick flippers and things like that, which I'm not. I can see how it doesn't work for them. It might be working for me, but we'll just need some more data to find that out. So from here, it's just onwards and upwards, right? So I've got two PSA, I got emails overnight that two of my PSA subs from November are just about ready to finish the process, although whatever that means with PSA, who knows? So there's another chance to test the model, right? To, again, depending on if any come back as PSA 10s, how I price them, does that cover for the cost of any PSA 5s that I'm likely to get or PSA 6s? Like, I haven't, this is great. One of the great things about this is I didn't whiff on any of these cards. Like, I got two PSA 10s and two PSA 9s. 50% gem rate is great. I would like it to be higher. Obviously, we always want it to be higher, but I didn't have I didn't have a PSA 4, and that's going to happen, right? So this is why that, being funded, having that cash is really, really important, really useful to me because it covers the fact that I might get a PSA 4 or I will get a PSA 4 or a PSA 5 or a card that just doesn't perform or whatever like that. So I feel in a good, comfortable place. There's no stress around things, which is exactly where I want it to be. But it doesn't mean that I'm necessarily sure of the model yet. So we'll see how we go, onwards and upwards, as I say. But let me know what you think. Does this make sense? Are there any glaring holes? Is there any particular problems that you see coming? Do you want to buy my cards? But thank you very much for watching. If you've got this far, thank you very much for watching. And onwards and upwards. And we'll see. Hopefully I get that PSA return really soon. And my next video can be on how that PSA return went. So thanks very much for watching. And may the force be with you.